Hello everyone, my name is Rachel and welcome back to my channel. So the case that I have for you guys today is a very scary and disturbing one. It does involve sexual assault and things like that, so if that's something that's very sensitive to you, this may not be the video for you. I'll say right off the bat that this is a case where I believe that police hit the ground running right away and they genuinely cared about solving this case. They put in their best efforts from the get-go, and it's really nice to see in cases like this. But before we get into the video, I want to go ahead and say a huge thank you to Brooklinen for partnering with me on today's video. Now, I've never been someone who wants to spend a lot of money on luxury bedding because it never seemed worth it to me, but now Brooklinen has completely changed my perspective. Brooklinen gives you the quality and comfort of luxury sheets at an affordable price by cutting out the middleman. Brooklinen was founded on the principle that everybody deserves beautiful, simple home essentials without the price markup. Brooklinen's classic and hardcore bundles cost between $200 to $250 depending on the size of your bed, but normally luxury sheets can cost upwards of $500. I have the Luxe Hardcore Sheet Bundle. These best-selling Luxe sateen sheets are just the upgrade that my bed needed. These sheets feature a luxurious 480 thread count and a little bit of a luminous finish, which really adds to that simple light and brightness that my room really needed. Sateen is usually more tightly woven and heavier than parcel, making it buttery soft and so cozy and warm, which is perfect for your year-round comfort. The other great part about Brooklinen is the online shopping experience. You can shop for their classic or luxe hardcore bundle from the comfort of your own home. You can mix and match over 20 colors and patterns for either the classic or luxe sheet set, extra pillows, and duvet cover. I was so excited when I finally put my bed together and I felt just how soft and smooth my new sheets are. They make my night so much more comfy and cozy, and I can definitely feel a difference in my quality of sleep. I'm someone who's a super light sleeper, so I'm pretty much always tossing and turning, and I'm throwing the blankets off, and if they don't feel quite right, against my skin, they really bother me and wake me up. But these are so soft and smooth that I definitely felt the difference, and I felt so much more comfy and more cozy. I'm so excited for the offer that Brooklinen has for you guys. Subscribers of this channel can get $20 off of any order over $100 when you click the link down below and use code RachelShannon. Again, make sure you click the link down below and use code RachelShannon for $20 off of any order of $100. Thank you again so much to Brooklinen for partnering with me on today's video. Okay, so with all of that being said, let's get into today's case. Today, we are going to be discussing the solved case of Brianna Denison. Brianna Denison was born March 29th, 1998 to her parents Bridget and Jeff Denison, and she had a brother named Brighton. Now, Brianna was definitely not a stranger to tragedy from the time that she was very young. Brianna's dad actually had a nationwide franchise business, so it seemed like the family would be pretty well off. However, when Brianna was only 6 years old and her brother was only 1 year old, Jeff was accused of millions of dollars of embezzlement and writing $1 million of bad checks. After this, Jeff actually had taken his own life at the age of only 34 years old. Obviously, this absolutely devastated the family. However, Bridget said that this made the family very close. They all had to stick together and get each other through this awful tragedy. The family moved back to Bridget's hometown of Mendocino, California, before moving back to Reno, Nevada. Then Brianna went on to graduate from Reno High School in 2006. She went on to study child psychology at Santa Barbara City College. She was determined to be a child psychologist because of her own trauma that she faced at such a young age. She wanted to use what happened to her to make others' lives better. Those around her knew Brianna as being absolutely hilarious with a feisty sense of humor. She was also described as being loving, spiritual, respectful, and trusting. She loved children, animals, and especially her dog Ozzy. She was known for her $1 million smile and her sparkling blue eyes. Her mother, Bridget, knew her lovingly as Breezy because she reminded her of a breath of fresh air on a cool summer day. Brianna absolutely loved traveling and had been all around the world to places such as Hawaii, New York, Mexico, Jamaica, Japan, Egypt, Hungary, Austria, and France. She had also studied abroad in Rome for a whole year with her family. She had such a radiant and outgoing personality that she was able to connect with just about anyone and was able to make friends wherever her travels took her. She was known to be on a straight edge path, didn't get into trouble, and just wanted to succeed in her life. So on Saturday, January 19th, 2008, 19-year-old Brianna was at home in Reno from college on her winter break, and at around 9:30 p.m. that night, she decided to go out and hang out with some old friends. Her and her friend Jessica went over to their other friend KT's house, which was located just a 3-minute walk away from the University of Nevada, Reno's campus. They all went to the Reno Sparks Livestock Center to go to a concert. After this concert, at around 12:30 a.m. to 1 a.m., KT, Brianna, and Jessica all took a bus to the Sands Regency Casino and Hotel. Shortly after this, Jessica decided to leave the party and go back to KT's house for the night and crash there. She went into the parking lot and flagged down a car that she noticed was leaving, and she asked the person for a ride. Jessica said that she could have walked home that night, but it was really cold. So even though looking back, this was a pretty dangerous and maybe not the best idea, she took a ride with a stranger who took her back to KT's house. Brianna and KT then went ahead to Mel's Diner, which was located in the hotel, to get some food. Then, after eating at around 4 a.m., the two of them got a ride from a friend and headed back to KT's house for the night. KT gave Brianna a pillow, blanket, and a teddy bear to get comfy and sleep on the couch before she headed into her own room for the night. By 4:23 a.m., Brianna had texted her boyfriend, who was living in Oregon. However, that next morning, when KT woke up and went into the living room to check on Brianna at around 9 a.m., Brianna was no longer on the couch. KT immediately noted that Brianna had left behind all of her belongings, such as her cell phone, her purse, her clothes, and her shoes. So she initially thought that maybe she went into another room to go sleep because all of her stuff was still there. So she went around and started searching the house to see if maybe she went and slept in one of her roommate's empty rooms. She went ahead and knocked on the doors, telling Brianna to wake up, but she got no response. So she left and, let Brianna sleep for a little bit longer before she went back and started banging on the doors and pounding on the doors to get her to wake up, but she still got no response. At that point, when she got no response, she realized that Brianna probably was not in the house. KT also noted that there was a small amount of blood on Brianna's pillow, and this did concern her, but she thought that it was possible that maybe her dog had just chewed something up and then threw up on her pillow. And for anybody who's a dog owner, this is a very realistic and normal thought. But still, she was getting really worried about where Brianna was. She couldn't figure out why she would leave the house. Plus, it was really cold out at the time, and she left behind everything. There was no way that she would have just left all of her stuff behind, especially with how cold it was. So KT went ahead and decided to call Brianna's mom, Bridget. In the call, KT was hysterical. She realized that the stain on the pillowcase probably was blood, and she was in a panic at this point. Bridget said that KT should call police and that she would be right over, so KT did. She went ahead and called police, and Bridget made her way to KT's house. Police then arrived shortly after. Officer Ben Rhodes was the first who arrived, and he started looking around the scene. Obviously, he saw that somebody had been sleeping on the couch. He noted that there was a blanket on the floor in the living room. And then he also noted that there was a blanket on the floor in the kitchen, following a path between the kitchen and then heading towards the back of the house, towards the back door. When they looked on the couch, they immediately noticed that the teddy bear that Brianna had been sleeping with was gone. They also noted 3 small bloodstains on the couch, which looked to be a mix of blood, saliva, and mucus. On the pillow, they also found smears of mascara. They also noted that there were impressions on the pillow that looked like bite marks, which indicated that Brianna had suffered some sort of wound while her face was pressed against the pillow. They said that she most likely was suffocated with the pillow after, looking at all of the evidence and looking at the scene. After further testing, the bloodstains and mascara all matched Brianna's DNA. So right off the bat, the evidence quickly told police that this was not a case of Brianna leaving voluntarily. They knew that something had to have happened to her in that house and that she most likely was abducted. and they thought that she probably was taken out of the back door. Going off of what they saw around the house, they also noted that the living room door was actually made out of glass, so they thought that it was possible that someone walking by outside could have seen Brianna sleeping on the couch through the glass. Then Katie admitted that they actually never locked the front door, so it was possible that somebody had just walked in. They basically explained that this house was kind of like a hotel where they left the front door unlocked and they locked up their individual rooms so that if somebody forgot their keys, they'd still have a way in. So this is sort of like a situation of a bunch of college students who feel safe in their college town. They're more worried about getting locked out of the house because I'm sure as roommates and living in a house with a bunch of other people, there probably was a ton of different times where somebody got locked out and it's really annoying. And, to avoid that entire situation, they just left the front door unlocked. I'm sure looking back, they know that this was not the most responsible thing to do. I'm sure they realized that looking back, and I'm sure they lock their doors now, so I don't want to be too harsh on the people in this case. Again, now they know how irresponsible it was, so I don't want to be too harsh on them because they were just a bunch of college students. They didn't really know back then how dangerous college campuses can be. We know that, but let's not be too harsh on people for leaving their front door unlocked. So police immediately swabbed the doorknobs of all the doors in this house to see if there was any way that they could find DNA that could point them in the right direction. And police were actually able to find that there was touch DNA on the doorknob of the back door of the house. The officer basically explained that literally just grabbing the doorknob and opening the door left behind enough skin cells to get a full touch DNA profile. As police were going through all of this and talking to everybody in the house, Katie and Jessica were honestly a little bit confused as to how it all happened. They wondered why, if somebody broke in, that the dog just didn't bark. Or they wondered if maybe the dog did bark and they just slept through it, which didn't really seem realistic to them, and the dog probably would have woken them up according to them. But they also wondered if maybe someone had just convinced Brianna to let him into the house, and that's how that happened. All of these different scenarios were going through the heads of everybody who was trying to figure out what happened to Brianna. So after learning of Brianna's disappearance, the community in Reno really band together to start searching for her. There were over 1,700 people who came out and wanted to help find her. Everybody was so shocked and devastated and honestly scared that something horrible happened to Brianna. They started by searching a 100 square mile area around the house, campus, and everywhere else they could think of, but they found nothing. The other factor that police were going off of was that there were reports of different sexual assaults throughout the area, so police set off to question any and all registered sex offenders in the area. Now, it was not long before police got a hit on the DNA that was found on the doorknob. This DNA had actually been linked to other cases of sexual assault that had happened in the area. So, one case happened on October 22nd, 2007. The victim, whose name is Amanda, but obviously her last name is not released to, keep her identity private. She said that she had been too scared to report this previously, but after seeing the news of what happened to Brianna and the fact that she was missing, she decided to come forward. She described that she was walking in the parking garage at the University of Nevada, Reno, when she was walking to her car when somebody came up behind her, grabbed her, pushed her to the ground, and then dragged her between two cars. She said that this man pointed a gun at her and then raped her before stealing her underwear and just leaving her there. She also was able to give police a description of this man. Then, a few days later, another student came forward to police to report that she too had been attacked in that same parking garage on campus on December 17th, 2007. In this case, which happened at around 2 a.m., a 22-year-old student named Emma had parked in this parking garage, which was located near campus, and which was also about a 6-minute walk away from KT's house. As she was getting out of her car, an unknown man rushed up behind her and choked her until she had passed out. He then put her in the back of his truck and then drove her to a secluded area until Emma woke up. When she woke up, her glasses had been shattered and she had wounds all over her face. After waking up, this unknown man had raped her before driving her back to her apartment and dropped her off. He also took her underwear with him. Of course, she immediately went to police to report this rape. When she did so, she was able to give police a detailed description of the attacker as well as the truck that he drove. Something that stood out to her about something that she saw in his truck was that there was a baby shoe on the floor of his truck. So this showed that he had a young child and that he was probably a father. After giving the description of this car, they determined that the truck that the attacker was driving was most likely a 2001 or 2002 Toyota Tacoma. Emma described to police that this man was a white male in his 20s to 30s with medium to dark brown hair, with a larger build but not too muscular. She also described that this man had large, meaty hands, and it looked like he had a job where he often worked with his hands. So clearly there was a disgusting, depraved, violent man who was running around the area and raping women around the campus. So by late January of 2008, police released a description of this man given by the women who had been attacked by him. They also told the public that this man liked to keep the underwear of the women that he attacked. Using his mannerisms and the way that he spoke to the victim, police said that this man was most likely in his 20s to 40s, who was uneducated and was probably socially awkward, probably a loner. However, for the time being, this man was not identified and Brianna still had not been found. The community continued to search desperately for Brianna, but there was no sign of her anywhere. But then, by February 15th, 2008, a man named Alberto Jimenez was walking back from a Subway restaurant after his lunch break from work at EE Technologies. It was a clear, cool day, and a lot of the snow that had been laying on the ground was starting to melt. As he was walking, he noticed that there was a Christmas tree laying on the ground on the side of the road, and he walked closer to it. Then he noticed two bright pieces of fabric laying on the ground in the South Reno field, but he couldn't quite make out what these pieces of fabric were. He walked a little bit closer and noticed that these two pieces of fabric were actually socks, which he described as being bright orange and almost neon-like. He then noticed that these socks were attached to a pair of feet, and then he saw the rest of the body. He initially thought that this body was a mannequin, as so many witnesses say. And to me, I feel like people initially think this because a body is just so unexpected to see. I feel like our brain just simply does not register it at first. We're used to seeing bodies that are, still and not moving as mannequins in clothing stores. But what he saw was not a mannequin. He noticed that there was some sort of wound on the right arm, and this is when he realized that this was the body of a deceased person. As soon as he realized this, he ran back to work as fast as he could to notify his boss. His boss then returned back with him, who immediately called the police. When police arrived, they immediately saw Brianna's body, which was located in a shallow ditch near a discarded Christmas tree, about 40 feet away from the road and about 8 miles away from KT's house. Luckily, since it had been pretty cold, her body was decently well preserved. Police said that Brianna's body was undressed with the exception of the socks that she was wearing, and then under her right knee, police found 2 pairs of thong underwear. One pair was pink, while the other was black with a Pink Panther logo on it. So it was thought that the pink pair actually belonged to KT, so don't really know how they got there. But they did not know who the black Pink Panther ones belonged to. The underwear were too large to belong to Brianna, and although there was DNA found on them, none of the DNA matched anybody connected to Brianna. Of course, again, police did ultimately confirm that the body belonged to Brianna, and she was only 19 years old at the time of her death. DNA taken from Brianna's body in her private area, which you know where it is. I'm uncomfortable to say it, honestly. This DNA did match the DNA that was found on the doorknob. Then Brianna's body was sent in for an autopsy. They had found that there was bruising all over her body, which showed that she probably fought her attacker with everything she had. They also found that there were ligature marks on the anterior and lateral areas of her neck. These ligature marks actually matched the underwear that were found with Brianna's body. So basically, they realized that Brianna had been strangled with the underwear that was found with her body. After the discovery of her body, hundreds of people showed up to the Reno Sparks Convention Center to hold a vigil for Brianna. People brought over 500 teddy bears. They brought hundreds of blue ribbons because blue was her favorite color, and they had tons of bouquet of flowers. Everybody gathered to pay their respects for this beautiful young life lost. By March 30th, which would have been Brianna's 20th birthday, People gathered to share cake and share memories that they all lovingly shared with Brianna. At this point, Brianna was buried next to her father in an undisclosed area in California. So at this point in the investigation, police took to the public to ask for donations so that they could expedite the process of testing over 3,000 DNA samples that had been backlogged into the system. They did get their donations. So many people donated money to expedite this process, and they were able to test all 3,000 samples. However, none of these DNA samples matched Brianna with her killer. As a side note though, there were 30 other unsolved cases that were linked to known offenders, so something good did come out of all of this effort. The other route that police took was to look into this person who gave Jessica a ride home after the party that night back to KT's house. Obviously, this was a stranger who none of the girls knew, and someone who did have access to the house and could have been, waiting for all the rest of the girls to go home. But after looking more into this person, police determined that he actually had nothing to do with this, which to me does make sense. I mean, if he was gonna harm someone, he probably would have harmed Jessica at that time, so it does make sense that this person was not the one who actually killed Brianna. So throughout the entire investigation, police had received over 4,000 tips and tons of men voluntarily submitting their DNA to help with the investigation. They also questioned over 700 potential suspects and took DNA from all of them. However, nothing came of this until November of 2008. So a woman had called police to say that her friend Carlene had confided in her about problems that she was having in her relationship. Carlene had told this friend, who was the one making the tip, that she had actually found underwear that did not belong to her in her boyfriend's truck. Carlene confronted her boyfriend about this underwear, and the man told her that he had actually found the underwear and stolen it from a laundromat. This man would later be identified as 27-year-old James Bela. When police looked into this tip, they realized that he did have similarities with the suspect described in the other sexual assault cases. He had also just recently gotten a truck that was similar to the one described by the victims, a 2006 Toyota Tacoma. So immediately, police went in and questioned him in relation to Brianna's murder, but he said that he had nothing to do with it. He said that the morning that Brianna had gone missing, he was with his girlfriend and said that she too would corroborate this. Police then asked him to submit a DNA sample, but he refused. Police later noted that James appeared very nervous. He would not make eye contact, he was sweating, and he was very fidgety throughout the entire interrogation. Police also later went on to say that whenever men would voluntarily give up their DNA, they pretty much knew that this DNA was not going to match the person that they were looking for. Obviously, they were still going to test it, but they kind of had a feeling that none of these men were actually responsible, because why would you voluntarily give up your DNA to match yourself to a crime unless you're just not very smart? But they pretty much knew that, and a lot of these men were doing it so that they could just rule themselves out and not be looked into, which I think is really cool. I think it's honestly awesome that a bunch of these men were like, hey, I know that I might match this description, so I just want to rule myself out so you don't waste your time looking into me, and so you know that I'm not connected to this crime. So again, they pretty much knew that any man who would give his DNA probably was not the person that they were looking for. They knew that the perpetrator was not going to want to give up his DNA. So they were looking for someone specifically who was very against giving up his DNA. So James at this point was looking pretty good for this crime. So police went ahead and spoke with some of the coworkers at his job where he worked as a pipe fitter, so someone who works with his hands. Coworkers said that they were all watching the news on the day that, the announcement was made that they found Brianna's body, and apparently, as they were talking about that, James apparently had said, "That bitch had it coming," which obviously is very concerning. It's really rude and disgusting to say, but it does not paint him in a very good light for this. Then, that same day that, this announcement was made, apparently James had asked his boss to lay him off of work so that he could go up to Seattle to start working on this new project that was up there. When his boss refused, he got really frustrated and really antsy. Either way, James did still decide to go all the way up to Washington. On his way up to Washington, he sold his Toyota Tacoma in Idaho before he arrived. He then stayed in Washington until December before he returned back to Reno. So police went ahead and questioned James's girlfriend, who again, James said would corroborate the story that he was with her on the morning that Brianna went missing. He also told police that she would corroborate that she was with him on the days that all of these other women were attacked, because police knew that this was all the same person, so they probably were bringing up these other rapes as well. James's girlfriend actually revealed to police that the two had a very toxic relationship. She told police that he would go MIA for days at a time, and when he would ask James where he's been, he would just tell her that he was just sleeping in his truck. She then let police know that he had sold his truck in Idaho and how he left for Washington and then lived up there for several weeks. So after several weeks of him living there, she also told police that she went up to Washington to help him move his stuff back to Reno. And that is when she found this unknown pair of underwear in his truck. Again, he told his girlfriend that he just stole them from the laundromat in Washington. So she basically was repeating everything that the friend had told police days earlier. She also basically denied his alibi. She said that she was not with him on the days that Brianna went missing and the same days that these other women were raped. She also confirmed that James was living in Sparks, Nevada when all of these rapes and the murder took place, which is just a 15-minute drive away from Reno. They also found out that the couple had a very young son together. So going back to the fact that this girl saw the baby shoe in his truck, lo and behold, he has a baby. So after telling police all of this, police went ahead and asked the girlfriend if they could get a DNA sample from their 4-year-old son that they had together. Because again, James refused to give his DNA to police, so she went ahead and gave them this sample. After testing the son's DNA, police discovered that it was a familial match to the person who committed these rapes and the murder. Using this, police were able to obtain an arrest warrant for James Bela. On November 25th at 5:30 p.m., James Bela was arrested. He was actually arrested while he was picking up his young son from the Stepping Stones Children's Center in Reno, which is a private preschool. Of course, as soon as he was arrested, police took a DNA sample from him, and very quickly, they were able to connect his DNA to the rapes of Amanda and Emma, as well as Brianna's murder. So he was booked into the Washoe County Jail on charges of first-degree murder, kidnapping, and sexual assault. Then police were able to track down the Toyota Tacoma that he had previously sold. They were able to use fibers that they found in this truck and then compare them to fibers that were found on Brianna's socks when her body was found. And these fibers were a match, which obviously indicates that she had been in this truck at some point. So the trial for James Bela started on May 12, 2010, and the prosecution was arguing for the death penalty. They described him as a serial rapist who was a predator and had a sick fetish for taking women's underwear and keeping them as trophies for his crime. So I didn't really mention this earlier, but obviously when sexual assaults happen, rape kits are typically performed, and there was DNA found on both Emma and Amanda that linked them to each other as well as Brianna. So forensic experts testified that the DNA found on all 3 of these women were most likely matches to James. They said that this DNA was 100% confirmed to match the semen taken from Brianna's body, as well as the underwear that was used to strangle her, and the DNA taken from the doorknob at KT's home. The prosecution also brought forward cell phone data that showed that his phone happened to be in the location of each crime right before it took place. So his cell phone was traced to be in or near the parking garage right before both Emma and Amanda were attacked, and he was near KT's house right before she was kidnapped. Both rape survivors took the stand at the trial, and Amanda did positively identify James as being her attacker. Carlene, James's then girlfriend, also took the stand to testify about their relationship and James's behaviors in relation to Brianna's case. So like I said, she testified that James was gone a lot, like we discussed earlier. She also said that the two started having some pretty severe relationships issues that started in October, which was right around the time of the first rape. After this, things just got worse and worse in their relationship. She also said that when she would bring up Brianna's case to James, because, she saw it on the news and she just wanted to talk about it as people do, that James refused to really talk about it. When he would talk about it, he said that the only reason that people even care about Brianna is because she's, quote, hot and came from a rich family. He said that if she didn't come from a rich family, that no one would even care. So to me, it sounds like he is openly just discussing his regret for choosing a victim that people would care about. So something that I forgot to mention in the video was the fact that police actually heard James and Carlene talking in the interrogation room, and Carlene confronts him and asks him, "Did you do this?" And he's basically like, "It doesn't matter." So I'm going to insert clips of that as well as the girlfriend testifying on stand. I do apologize in advance. The sound quality is not very good. So just a warning for that. This was 2008, 2009 that this all took place. So audio is not what it is today. So bear with me of that. But here are those clips.
Having issues in October of 2007. He was gone a lot. Like we were fighting almost every day. I remember in December of 07 clearly, because it was really bad. We were sleeping in separate rooms.
What was the defendant's reaction when you told him that you believed that Ms. Denison's body had been found?
He was completely silent. He didn't say anything. He was just silent.
The defense, on the other hand, didn't really have a lot to go off of. They just argued that James was a loving father and was a good person at heart. Other than this, they really just focused on the flaws that they were able to find while the trial was being run, as well as point to the way that James grew up and how all of this contributed towards his behaviors. So now let's take a moment to discuss James Bela, who he is, and look into his background. James Bela was born in Chicago, Illinois, and was the fifth child born to Joseph and Kathy Bela. When James was 9 years old, his family up and left Chicago and moved to Reno, Nevada, so that his job could just find a better job out there. James was very poor growing up, and the family reported that James's father, Joe, was extremely abusive towards his children and his wife, Kathy. Kathy reports that she suffered the brunt of the abuse from James's father, Joe. She said that she had suffered several broken teeth, broken ribs, and even had to get wrist surgery from being beaten up, tied up, and bound so many times. She said that she had her earrings ripped out from her ears and that her hair was pulled out on multiple occasions. She said that the kids could always hear her screaming and even witnessed some of the beatings. Kathy said that there were times that she would go and hide in the children's room, go hide under their bed, and the children actually witnessed Joe going in and then dragging her out from under the bed. James's sister testified that they were often too scared to even leave their rooms because of all the abuse that was going on, even if it was just to go to the bathroom. She said that they would even have buckets in their rooms so that they didn't have to leave their rooms to go to the bathroom. So they stayed in their rooms as long as they possibly could and just went to the bathroom in these buckets. The defense used this to testify that the house that James grew up in was filled with verbal and psychological abuse towards the children. When Joe was asked about this abuse via phone call, he admitted that yes, he did beat his wife, but he never beat his children. When he was asked if these beatings were severe, he said, "You'd have to ask Kathy." He said, yeah, he guesses some of them were bad, but he's paying for it now. He said that he was a great father, he loved his kids, but he had a lot of mental health issues. He did go on to serve a year in jail for charges related to altering a serial number on a firearm. So it's basically confirmed that, yeah, James and his siblings had witnessed some horrific abuse growing up. They didn't necessarily, face the abuse at the hands of his fathers, but I do want to point out the fact that witnessing this type of abuse is abuse. Watching your mother being beaten all the time, watching all of these horrific things going on, that's abuse. I don't care if he says he was a great father, didn't once lay his hand on his kids, that's still abuse towards them. They had to witness something horrific, and that's not fair to them. So, is it proven that James had faced some sort of abuse? Yes, he grew up in a very, very dysfunctional and violent household. but the court pointed to the fact that all 4 of James's siblings grew up to be normal and non-violent offenders. In high school, James was described as being a very average student who didn't get into trouble, did his homework, and got good grades. After graduating, James went into the Marine Corps. He trained in 1999 in San Diego and then was promoted to the rank of Lance Corporal and then was stationed in New Jersey, but he was dishonorably discharged in 2001 after he tested positive for marijuana. Like I said, everyone around him saw him as pretty normal, but those who served with him in the Marine Corps described him as a quick-tempered bully. When he returned to Reno in 2002, he was arrested for threatening his former girlfriend's neighbor with a knife, and then the girlfriend filed an order of protection against him. By April of 2003, he pled guilty and was sentenced to DUI school, meaning that he probably had been intoxicated when he did this threatening, so that's probably why he went to DUI school, and then he was ordered to have no contact with the victim for a year. Which is weird to me. Why a year? You think that after a year he gets to start contacting her again? I think that's a little bit weird. I think it should be forever, but that's just me. After this, though, he had met his girlfriend, Carlene, who he was dating at the time that all of this happened. And then by 2004, the couple had their son. He had worked as a pipe fitter, like I said earlier, and he had actually worked on several buildings at the UNR campus. He occasionally trained in jiu-jitsu, earning himself a blue belt, which is 1 step above beginner. His martial arts teacher basically described him as being a normal dude who fit into class. He didn't really stand out much to him, but he did stop going to jiu-jitsu about a year before all of this happened. James's friends also described him as a funny guy who enjoyed going to bars and taverns. James's father went on to say that he is upset about the news of hearing what he did, but he's his son and he will always love him. But then he went on to say that the two had not spoken in years. There was never any signs to his father that made him think that he was capable of this. He doesn't know how James went from being this normal kid and then not having any contact with his dad for 16 years and then suddenly going on to be this violent rapist and murderer. So basically what he's saying is, if maybe he grew up and this started happening immediately, started showing all these signs and, was raping women or at least was, being weird towards women and had other behaviors that kind of showed this when he was growing up or at least while he was still in contact with his dad or immediately once he cut off contact, that would kind of make more sense. But James was normal. He didn't have any other behaviors other than this one incident that showed that he was capable of this. It's not like something happened and all of a sudden his dad, caused all of this to happen. Nothing that I know of happened with his mom. He didn't have any contact with his dad for 16 years. And then all of a sudden, out of the blue, he goes on to start raping and murdering women. So there was nothing that the defense could really pinpoint to that showed this is the event that caused him to snap. This is what happened. This is why he all of a sudden started having these behaviors. There was nothing that pointed towards that. So the other thing that the defense pointed to was the fact that the person who made this tip that ultimately led police back to James was anonymous. The defense argued that James was robbed of his right to face his accuser because she is anonymous. So with this, I don't necessarily know all of the laws in Nevada surrounding this, but there are tons of cases that go on to be solved that come from anonymous tips. This friend isn't accusing James of anything. She's not the one who is his accuser. His accusers, 2 of them, took the stand. They're the ones that are accusing him of the rape, and then the girl he murdered, the other accuser, is not there to accuse him of doing anything because she's not alive. So I don't think that even stood in court because of what happened. And, I don't think that this was necessarily a flaw. I just don't think that it's right that she's actually the accuser. It was literally just a tip. The defense also tried arguing that the 3 crimes that James is being convicted of clearly were not all committed by the same person. So the main thing that they argued was that Amanda claimed that she got an STI from the person who raped her, but James does not have this same STI. So it's impossible that he's the one that gave it to her. Thus, he could not be the one who raped her. So I don't really know how to explain this. It's obviously very possible that Amanda thought she got it from the person who raped her, but really it was somebody else. It's definitely possible she got it from somebody else. Maybe other people that she had, relations with had lied to her and told her that they're not the ones who gave it to her, even if they were. There's so many things that could explain this, and I can't speak for it. I'm not Amanda. I don't know anybody who she's had relations with. Obviously, I don't even know who she is. So any number of things could explain this. Doesn't mean that James is not the one who harmed her just because he doesn't have this STI. So in the trial, James actually did not take the stand to testify on behalf of himself. When James's lawyers were later asked why they chose not to have James testify for himself, they admitted that it was because they knew that James had no remorse for his victims, and that would have shown if he took the stand. They said that he simply was not a sympathetic character that the jury could identify with, so it wouldn't have been beneficial for him to take the stand. So by June 2nd, 2010, the trial for James came to an end, and the jury of 8 women and 6 men went into their deliberations. They only deliberated for 2.5 hours before coming back with their verdict of guilty for 2 counts of rape and 1 count of murder. For this, Judge Robert Perry sentenced him to death plus 4 additional life sentences.
We, the jury in the above entitled action, having found the defendant James Michael Bela guilty of count 4, murder in the first degree, and having found beyond a reasonable doubt that an aggravating circumstance exists in this case, and that any mitigating circumstance or circumstances are not sufficient to outweigh the aggravating circumstances found, therefore by reason thereof, set the penalty of sentence to be imposed at death. Dated the 2nd day of June, 2010, signed 4 persons.
After the sentencing, he appealed, saying that he received inoffensive counsel for his defense. They first argued that this case received a ton of media attention before it went to trial, and that they should have granted a change of venue, but this was never granted. They then argued that 3 of the jurors were not qualified to sit on the jury. They said that when these 3 jurors were questioned on whether they're willing to consider all forms of punishment besides the death penalty, they said no. So this shows apparently that they had some sort of bias, that they were more likely to choose the death penalty than anything else. They were also more likely to find him guilty than not guilty. However, this request for appeal was ultimately denied. I'm pretty sure he appealed multiple times and all of these were flatly denied, so I'm very thankful for that. So after this, the University of Nevada, Reno made some changes to their campus to make it a safer place. They installed over 20 new blue lights, which students could press if they felt that they were in immediate danger, and police would arrive to help them in less than 2 minutes. They also overall just made more of a police presence on campus. They had officers escorting students from buildings when they had to navigate campus after dark or in any other sort of unsafe or unsettling situation. They also started giving seminars on public safety, and the female students were given rape whistles. Then Bridget actually started the Bring Bree Justice Foundation, which aims to help support victims of other violent crimes, lobby for new DNA laws, and support stricter punishments for violent offenders. By May of 2013, the Nevada governor signed in Brianna's law, which requires that anybody who is arrested on felony charges is swabbed by cheek for DNA. If there is enough probable cause, the DNA will then be submitted into a DNA database to compare to other cases. Since this law, numerous DNA samples have been entered into these databases. It has helped solve, I believe, 10 cold cases and identify suspects in over 1,000 other crimes, many of which were sexual assault cases, which is just so cool to see. It's so cool that this new law is helping solve so many other crimes and bringing so many other victims to justice, even those 10 cold cases which may not have otherwise been solved. As of right now, James is still sitting on death row with over 70 other inmates who are also waiting to be executed. No one in the state has been executed since 2006, so who knows when or if that will ever happen. I'm just happy that he's still sitting in jail and hopefully won't be getting out for the rest of his life. I am so very impressed with Brianna's mother, who was able to take this horrific tragedy and make something good happen. They have a hand in solving so many other cases, and that's just so amazing and admirable. They can sleep at night knowing that Yes, their daughter was murdered. Yes, something horrific happened to her. But there's so many other families who now have closure in their cases because of what Bridget has done. It's so amazing to see someone like Bridget take something that happened so horrible and so tragic and horrific to help others get the justice that they also deserve. I'm just so upset, honestly, with how this was all able to play out. They went out, they had their night of fun, and they did make it home safely. We're always talking about, different ways to go out and still have fun and keep your friends and loved ones safe and make it home safely at the end of every night. But Brianna did. She did make it home safely, and so did her other friends. But then somehow, James, I guess, saw Brianna sleeping and decided to take that as an opportunity to live out his sick fantasy. I'm not exactly sure how I think he was able to get her. I don't know if he knocked on the door and, Brianna let him in, or if he was simply walking by or driving by and saw a girl sleeping alone on the couch. I don't know if he had been watching them all night and was following her. I honestly don't know how that would have played out. I wish I found more about that. I don't think that's ever really been revealed. We know that he went into the house and took Brianna, put the pillow over her face, and got her out of there and killed her. But how he got in, I don't think we ever found that out. But either way, I don't think this was something of him going in there to sexually assault her and then it went wrong and then he killed her because of that. I think he went in there with the intention to kill her on purpose. I think that after these, different rapes, that his behaviors were escalating and he was getting more and more violent to the point that raping women just simply was not enough for him. This case is just so sick and horrible to listen to. My heart absolutely goes out to Brianna and her family. Brianna had so much going for her, and she could have gone on to help so many other children who have gone through the same things or similar things as her. She could have helped so many children who have to live through trauma, but James took this amazing young woman from the earth and changed the lives of 2 others by violating them in ways that they will never be able to recover from. He took something from them that they will never be able to get back, because I don't want us to forget about the 2 other women, and probably even more, who have been victimized by James. I do almost think that there are other women out there who may have been sexually assaulted and raped by James, who maybe just were too afraid to report it, or they weren't believed by the person that they reported it to, or they just didn't make the connection yet. I don't know. I don't think it was just these 2. I think it's too violent and he's too disgusting to just rape these 2 women. I think there's more people out there and we just haven't made that connection yet. There may not be. I don't know. I'm just saying that because just based on his behaviors, I think that there could be, but there really may not be. We don't really know, but again, I just don't want us to forget about these 2 other women who were victimized by him and whose lives have been changed forever because of him. Either way, I'm just so happy that this monster is behind bars and is going to stay there for the rest of his life. I hope that the other inmates know exactly what landed him in prison, and I hope that they are not taking kindly to him. I hope that he's miserable. I hope the absolute worst for this sick monster. But either way, you guys know I could rant on this forever about how just sick James is and how none of these women deserved for any of this to happen to them, and how I'm just glad that he's behind bars. So that is where I will leave it. But either way, that is where I'm going to end today's video. If you liked this video, please make sure to go ahead and leave this video a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. I put out new true crime and mystery videos every single week. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell so you don't miss out on any of my future videos. Don't forget to go ahead and click the link down below and use code RachelShannon to get $20 off of a 100 order from Brooklinen. Don't forget to go ahead and follow my Twitter and Instagram. Both will be linked down below. And if you have absolutely any case suggestions, please make sure to send those suggestions over to my email at RachelShannonCases@gmail.com. With that, I hope you guys have a great week. Stay safe, stay healthy, and I hope to see you next time. Bye.